Hi, this is Alexander with another Lightroom develop video. Today I'm looking at an older photo that I made while hiking in the Alps in summer 2010, fall 2010, looking at the picture. And I was attracted to this scene because the side-lit, backlit trees were growing nicely, but obviously that doesn't come out in the photo like I had seen it on location, which very much has to do with our selective human vision. So shooting on location using the camera always involves thinking about what you would have to do to the picture after the fact. In preparation here, I've already removed some sensor dust spots, because that would be rather boring for you to watch. And I've set a custom white balance because back then I was using uni white balance, and that leads to a picture that is very, very green tinted. The first thing that I want to do is I want to switch from Adobe's default Adobe Color Profile to my own preferred profile, Camera Neutral. And you see this drastically changes the rendition of the picture, especially the colors. All the green and yellow tones have changed a lot in comparison to Adobe Color. And this image looks much flatter, which I like as a starting point. Because I was using uni white balance to capture this photo, the picture is also very, very bright, which is most clear here in the sky, in particular on the left side where the sun was. This flare here hints at that too. So I want to even out the sky to make that look more balanced and less distracting. Removing distractions is always the biggest thing in pictures. And I do that with a mask, of course. I choose a linear gradient, and starting with an exposure that's almost -1, I drag this over the frame here and feather it out really, really wide to have a smooth transition and to counter this uneven brightening of the sky. And now the linear gradient, of course, affects the foreground as well, and I want to eliminate that. And for this purpose, I intersect this linear gradient with a sky selection. I press and hold my Option or Command key to change these two buttons from Add and Subtract to Intersect. Alternatively, I can also press the 3 more buttons here and choose Intersect Mask With, and then I choose Select Sky. And you see this limits the effect immediately to just the sky portion. Maybe it's still too bright a little bit, so I can bring that down even more to even out the sky here. And maybe I want to feather that linear gradient out a little bit more too, to make that more even still. Here's a tip: when you have some pretty broad areas that you want to inspect carefully, it might be easier to actually zoom out to make that picture smaller, to reveal more clearly where is a darkening occurring, where is a lightening occurring. So instead of zooming in here to inspect detail, I zoom out to say 25%. Then I have a really, really small picture. And you see here is something that's probably lens vignetting here. So inspecting this large blue area is easier this way here when I'm zooming out and create a smaller sized image. While I'm zooming, it's always worth inspecting the transitions when you have a sky selection. In this instance, Lightroom did a fairly good job finding the sky and creating a good transition here. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. Then it might be better to actually use a linear gradient itself to affect the sky instead of the sky selection alone, to avoid odd transitions. Okay, now that we have evened out the sky, the whole picture looks rather hazy, and I'd like to get more detail here in that mountain. Obviously for this I use the dehaze slider, and that slider is always a bit difficult to predict what it will do. Sometimes it introduces really strange colors. Here in this instance it leads to a bump in contrast and also saturation, which is quite beneficial. And it makes the whole image a bit darker too, which is quite okay with regards to the distribution of the tones. I can probably push up the whole exposure a little bit now to compensate for that. And my shadows are getting a bit dark, so maybe I increase those as well. And now I have a picture that already begins to look more like what I remember seeing on scene, but obviously the glow here on these trees is still missing. Now, one way to add more pop to a specific color could be to use the HSL panel, but here we have a mix of green and yellow tones, and I want to affect all of those, and that would be a bit tricky, in particular because the yellow is also here in the foreground in that grass, which I don't want to affect with any adjustment. So the logical solution is a local adjustment. For this one, because it's relatively free form, I'm using a brush. I create a new mask with a brush. And for the brushing, I'm choosing a whites adjustment. I set this to 100% so I see clearly what I'm doing. I might increase the flow a little bit. I don't want to apply the entire effect all at once, so I keep the flow a little bit below 100 here in like at 68%. I can always add more by brushing over an area multiple times. And now I simply want to brush over those trees. And you see how brushing whites into those trees has a very nice effect of bumping up the brightness, just the upper part of the brightness. And it really helps to bring that side lit or backlit glow out on those trees. And as I do this, it's obvious that what I'm doing here is not just affecting the trees, but it's also affecting the background here. And there's a very easy way to prevent that. And that's simply by subtracting a color that's not at all part of the trees from my brushing. So I can zoom in here, choose subtract, and then color range. And I simply select those blue tones. And you see instantly everything that's in the background here that was blue has been deselected and is not part of my mask anymore. Only the trees are affected by this. And what's really, really neat now is if I go back to my brush, I can actually continue brushing more here and it will not affect the background. I can brush only into the trees and further strengthen this effect of enhancing the glow of these trees. Maybe to further strengthen this, I might want to change the color temperature here now, perhaps the tint as well. And I can also go into the saturation and make these trees a little bit more saturated to help further this effect of them being glowing in that backlight. What's left is, of course, taking care of this lens flare here with the patch tool. Oh, we don't need that overlay. And of course, it's always advisable to use heal. Clone rarely will work in these situations. And just make a freeform selection here, and there goes that lens flare. Last not least, I think maybe that foreground here, the immediate foreground, this relatively bright and has a lot of detail that detracts a little bit from what I actually care about in the picture. So I use another brush here and I choose a burn tool here. I updated the burn tool here, by the way, to default to -1 instead of just a third of a stop, because I find this far more useful. You can make an adjustment and then in this drop down here choose to update the preset if you changed it. And that is how I changed this burn tool to default to -1. And then I just brush a little bit here on the bottom part of the frame to reduce the brightness, maybe here on the side as well. Just help to push the eye a little bit further into the frame. And maybe because it was late afternoon, I should perhaps give the overall white balance a little bit of a push towards the warmer here. And maybe as a final touch, increase the overall contrast as well. And I think that is a pretty convincing result now. quick comparison with the backslash key. I can switch before and after, and you see now in this final image the glow of the trees really comes out. The overly bright sky has been reduced and controlled. The distractions have been removed, and the eye can move to what's really important in the frame without being distracted by anything else. And that's it. I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions, drop me a note. Thank you.